over the past few weeks, we've been getting some sometimes long and sometimes short, but always piquant readings from the book of Genesis as the first reading. Following the Revised Common Lectionary, we're moving through a bank of Genesis readings. We're almost at the end, about to move into a different place, but at the moment still Genesis. And on the front covers of the pew sheets for the past few weeks, we've had a number of woodcut images of various scenes that have been illustrative of those readings. Today's reading, Jacob wrestling, is one of the most interpreted of all of those Genesis stories, trying to work out exactly what it is that's going on and exactly what it is that it means has tied commentators in knots as complex as the sorts of wrestling knots that seem to have occupied the entire night as Jacob endured his test. Here he is wrestling with a man, unnamed, undefined. All sorts of different ideas have been thrown up. Is it a Canaanite demon? Is it Esau? All sorts of ideas. And ultimately, though, in this version of the story, as we've got it in Genesis, it comes down to being, yes, a divine being, but someone who Jacob identifies as having seen God face to face. And so this man with whom Jacob has been wrestling is in fact God, it seems, or at any rate often portrayed, as in the pew sheet, as an angel with whom Jacob wrestles. And in the aftermath of an extraordinary, relentless, never-ending, it would seem, fight, in the aftermath, Jacob says, "I'm not going to let you go unless you bless me." Jacob's a big fan of seeking blessings, and in fact, in past times, he's even gone to extraordinary lengths, meeting up with his name, which is sometimes interpreted as trickster, in order to seek that blessing. And here, where he's been wrestling all night with this man, and he seems to have the upper hand, he takes the opportunity to get another blessing. What was that blessing to be? Who could say? Maybe it was more wives and more kids and more land. Those seem to be the sort of things he was pretty much on about at this point. Instead, though, the exchange that we have takes us into a quite different place, a series of little dialogues. He says, "Let me go, for the day is breaking." This is the man. But Jacob says, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." In response, the man asks Jacob his name. "Name yourself." And he does. And the man replies by telling him that he shall have a new name, not Jacob, but Israel. Not the trickster anymore, but rather a name that in itself implies the presence of God. God preserves, or something like that. We're not quite sure exactly what Israel means. In turn, Jacob asks the man his name. And he just says, "Why are you asking my name?" And he gives the blessing. That's the point at which Jacob wakes up. That's the point at which Jacob begins to understand who it is that he has been wrestling with this long night. It is none other than God. And he names the place for what he has encountered there. And Jacob becomes Israel. Fabulous story. Really good for illustration. You can even turn it into something interesting for kids if you're feeling very brave. But what on earth are we to do with it today? Does it ever feel like you're in the middle of a wrestling match? Does life ever feel like that? You're encountering an unnamed, unidentifiable opponent who will not let go. And you're just wrestling and wrestling and wrestling to the point where it seems you can't endure on either side any longer, and you just wait for the day to break. There's perhaps an element of that in some people's current situations. Who is this? What is this thing with which we are wrestling, and when is it all going to end? I think that in such circumstances, one of the things that we need to do is to try and kind of do a little bit of what Jacob asks and see if we cannot find in the midst of all this a blessing. Where is the blessing? And how might we extract it? Because that's what Jacob does. I mean, this extraordinary wrestling match and the final demand, on the cusp of victory demand that Jacob makes is for a blessing. And, he gets it. He receives it. How does he know to ask for it, and how does he know to ask for it aright? Perhaps tried and true experience. Prayer, something in which we engage as Christians on a very regular basis, is, I think, one such mechanism. And as we find ourselves perhaps asking God to take away all the bad stuff, and perhaps to turn everything back to how it used to be, well, maybe not that, maybe transform it into something new and perhaps even a little bit better for some. Perhaps in the midst of all that, what we can actually ask for, certainly for ourselves, but even for the world of which we are a part, is a blessing. Of what that blessing may consist, we can probably only begin to guess. Like I say, Jacob probably thought the blessing he was asking for was more wives, more kids and more land. Didn't kind of totally work out that way. The blessing that he received in the form of a new name made him into something that was beyond anything he could have remotely comprehended at the time. And perhaps that's the kind of blessing that we need to seek after right now. What is going to be not just something that's going to get us up in the morning, though that might be necessary too. Not something that's just going to restore our fortunes, but in fact something that is going to transform us as individuals and indeed as a society. That our name, the one that identifies who we truly are, may be one at which God is at the centre. That God may preserve us, that God may guide us, that God may guard us, that God may show us the way that God would have us go. And as we wrestle with our own demons or our own brothers and sisters or our own angels or our own God, every one of us is called in that moment of respite, in that moment of I can't do this anymore, to ask for a blessing and to see what comes. The Lord be with you.